Thank you all for joining us. I'm Ron Culp. I have the good fortune of teaching here at DePaul, and I also chair the Center for Leadership and Public Relations. Many of you have already been tweeting #PlankMentor. We're going to try to get this thing trending today, so be sure to join the conversation. We're still waiting for a couple of people whose airplanes, thank you for Minneapolis arriving. We may have a couple others joining us in due time, but we thought we should begin the program because we want you to get the full advantage of what is taking place today. And here's how we're going to operate. I'm going to introduce our guests. Then we're going to have questions posed of them by students from the 6 universities who are participating in the program today, the PRSSA members from those colleges. And they're each going to start with questions, and then we're going to have plenty of time for you to ask your questions. So when you hear things, you're going to jump in. When that is through, that's going to run us about an hour. And then we're going to spend about a half an hour, which will just be a conversation, one-on-one, say hello to our special guests and put a name with a face. So again, thank you for joining us today. Also, thanks to the PRSSA chapters, all 3 of them, from DePaul, Columbia, and Loyola. They immediately signed on to co-host this event, and they'll make it a real special engagement. And then we have 3 other colleges that immediately said they would like to be here, and we're thrilled that you're here from all over this area. When we decided that we're going to honor the 6 mentors that you're about to meet, they agreed pretty quickly. And then I sent them a note, and they said, I said, we'd kind of like to not only give you an award at the dinner tonight, where they'll be recognized, but we'd like you to come, if you could, and spend some time with students. It was the fastest RSVP I've ever received. Thank you all. It was a matter of minutes. Certainly all of them weighed in by the end of the day. And that's what this is all about. They're giving back, and they're giving back in many ways, and you're going to hear in a moment from them. I'd also like to say that when I mentioned this to some of our previous honorees, they're like, darn, I wish we could have done something like that. And so they raised their hands and said, we'd like to come and participate in the program. So I wanted to thank Ann Markaloo for being here. Just arrived from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Ann is the former, actually founding director of the Collection Hilliard office there in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And before that, she was the Chief Communications Officer at Dayton-Hudson, which we now all know as Target. So we're pleased that Ann is with us, as well as John Devaney. And John came in from New Orleans to be with us. And John heads his own very successful regional agency down there, Devaney Communications. We're going to be joined by a couple of others, and we'll let them notify us when they arrive as well. And my boss, thank you, Selma, for joining us. We have a new dean here at DePaul that we're very excited about. And so this is one of those things that I get a note from her, can I come? I'm like, you can come to anything I do, sweetheart. So, Selma, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you for your support of all we do in the PRAD program here. Okay, now what you're here for are to meet some really outstanding leaders in the public relations profession, who, like I said, will be honored tonight with the Milestones in Mentoring Award. We're going to start with Pat Ford. Pat is the Vice Chairman of Burson Marsteller. He was named that in 2012 after serving as president and CEO of the agency's North American operations. Today, Pat also serves as the chairman of the firm's fast-growing Asia Pacific region with 18 offices and 11 affiliates. Next to him, we have Wendi Strong. Wendi is the corporate honoree tonight at tonight's dinner, and she's the Executive Vice President of Enterprise Affairs and the Chief Communications Officer of San Antonio-based USAA. It's a leading financial services company that you probably have all heard about. Wendi and her amazing team have turned that company and its reputation into a real juggernaut. It's one of Fortune magazine's most admired corporations. Our agency honoree is Andy Polansky. Andy is the Chief Executive Officer of Weber Shandwick, which, as you all know, is a major global public relations agency with offices in 81 countries around the world. Andy was named the CEO exactly 2 years ago, maybe as of tomorrow, after serving. Could probably seem longer. He served as the global president since 2004. And then Dr. Lynne Salllot is our educator mentor. And Lynne is a distinguished professor, a teaching professor of public relations in the Grady College at the University of Georgia. And then our young professional who is joining us is Jose Rivera. And Jose is an adjunct professor at California State University in San Bernardino. And in addition to teaching campaigns classes, which we're all familiar with, and writing courses, which we all need to be familiar with, Jose is the PRSSA Chapter Advisor. Anyway, you can learn more about these distinguished professionals by tuning into tonight's live streaming of the Planck Center Awards program, which you can get to by a link on the Planck Center website, #PlanckMentor, or through my blog. But it's now time for the students to take over the classroom. You won't see me again. And with that, I'm introducing Laura Davis from Purdue University. Go Boilermakers.
Hi, I'm Laura Davis. I'm a junior from Purdue University, and I serve on Purdue's PRSSA Executive Board. And my questions will be directed to Pat Ford. What was some of the best advice you received early on in your career from a mentor?
I think for me, the best and probably most valuable advice that I still try to think about just about every day is to never stop learning. In other words, whether it's about our business or about our client's business or about global events that weigh on our business or client's business, it's extremely important that we be well-rounded and be inquisitive. It's an interesting dynamic that happens in a lot of business settings, which is you see in a dysfunctional setting, at least, you see a lot of people who maybe don't listen as closely to what's actually happening in a organizational dynamic, because they're sitting there thinking of what they're going to say, and they keep thinking they've got to have the answers for everybody so they can seem smart. And in fact, the smartest people, usually that I've worked with, are the ones asking the questions. And that notion of starting out with a really good foundation of what we call evidence-based communications, of doing the right kind of research, doing the right kind of homework, so that when you show up in a meeting in whatever setting, you're not asking questions that you haven't got a foundation of some learning in already. And I think that's the most valuable I've had. And I think as we go through our careers, I think it's very important that we think very consciously about where where our learning centers are and where those teachable moments are.
Should any other panelists like to weigh in? My next question
I
is.
think I nailed it.
My next-
They heard me say I wanted one bill per question at the most.
My next question is, what decisions have you made in your career that you look back on and feel were mistakes, and what have you learned from your mistakes?
So that question comes up from time to time, and I would say there's barely a day or week that goes by that we don't make mistakes, all of us. But I'm going to do something that may or may not be a good thing. I'm going to use a sports analogy now. We just finished the World Series last night, and one of the great heroes of the past 20 years in the World Series is a gentleman named Mariano Rivera, who was the closer for the New York Yankees. He was the relief pitcher that would finish up games for the New York Yankees. And there were many, many reasons why he was one of the greatest of that category of all time, and a great athlete and a great human being. But one of the most important was the uncanny ability to completely blow up one night and then come out the next night, suit up, and not let that bother his performance. He'd learn from that experience and he'd move on. So what I would just say is, I actually don't spend a lot of time ranking mistakes or there are regrets that you make either in your personal life. I started to go to law school, and when I got out of college, I then decided I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I quit that with a full intention within a year or two of going for an MBA. And that was about 40 some odd years ago, and I only gave up the idea about 2 or 3 years ago. Because there are these great executive MBA programs. I've actually spoken to some of them. They're wonderful programs. It's just hard sometimes to do that. So I have a regret about that. Have I regretted some hires that I've made or some decisions that we made here and there? Sure, but what you try to do is not dwell on that or get down. Mistakes happen. One thing we've learned over many years, and I think particularly for those of us that have been involved in crisis management and so on, people have an amazing capacity to accept that mistakes happen. Nobody expects you or anybody else to be perfect, but they have zero tolerance for being manipulated, lied to, or having you make that same mistake over and over and over again. And I think what all of us have to do is say, mistakes happen, brush yourself off, suit up again, and learn from that mistake and move on. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my years in business.
May I build on that? Sure. Now, I want to build on that because Mariano Rivera is a hero of mine. His signed jersey hangs in my office. And one other point I would make about Mariano Rivera that I think is important to consider as you contemplate where you might explore your career opportunities is Mariano Rivera essentially threw one pitch, and everyone knew the pitch he was going to be delivering when they stepped up to the batter's box. And we live in a world where there's a lot of interesting evolution in the world of media, and there's all these changing dynamics, and people, it's a little bit hard to follow sometimes. Like, do I need to specialize in something, or do I need to know everything that's going on about everything, every new skill set? What's interesting to me is he had one pitch, it was amazing, and he was the most extraordinary reliever in the history of baseball. And so you don't have to be all things to all people. You could very well be, you develop a particular expertise, and you could be terrific at it and really differentiate yourself in that respect, and that's certainly what he did.
Can I just point out Rivera?
The wisdom in that comment makes me think of the other mistake that I and my firm made, which was before Andy Polansky became king of the world, we really wish we had somehow figured out a way to recruit him about 25 years ago. Business would be much better off.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to pass it on to another student.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Switek. I am a senior here at DePaul University, and I also serve as the Vice President of DePaul University's PRSSA Chapter. So I'm going to direct my questions to Wendi Strong. So my first question is, can you tell us about a mentor who influenced your career, and share an important lesson he or she taught you.
Sure, I'd be happy to. My first real mentor was a gentleman named Andy Anderson, who I worked for at Rosewood Hotels and Resorts. And he was a salesman. And he hired me to become the first head of public relations and advertising for this company. He took a real interest in me, and he taught me so many things. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, but one of the things that stood out for me, there were a few things that stood out for me that were really valuable lessons for me early in my career. The first is that relationships are everything. So, and that I have just come back to over and over and over, especially now with the changes that are happening in our industry and in the communications world in general. It all comes back to your relationships. That's how information is conveyed. That is how behavior change is conducted. That is how you will be successful. It's based on the people that you get to know and care about and learn from. And he was, because he was in sales, of course, you know, to him it was just second nature. It's not second nature to all of us. And sometimes that's because of how we've been taught, or sometimes that's just a factor of our personalities. But in this business, and in fact in any business, really connecting with people is going to be your key to success. So that was one thing. And then the other really valuable lesson that he taught me, and there's like so many, but the other one was nobody has it all figured out. And I think that's a really important one when you're starting out in your career and you get into a job, and no matter what it is, it's going to feel like it's over your head, and you're going to think, I don't know how to do this, and all these people around me know what they're doing, and I don't know what I'm doing. And he used to say to me, trust me, nobody knows what they're doing. And it was such a wonderful sort of freeing idea. And the reason that I believed him was because he was so vulnerable with me, and he was open and authentic, and he told me when he didn't have something figured out. So, you know, so I could see him learning his way as a, 30-year professional in the hotel industry, coming to grips with things that he had never seen before, or challenges that he hadn't had to meet, and just the way that he learned his way and kind of felt his way sometimes through his profession, his career, really inspired me.
So my second question is, what is your hope for the future of public relations?
Two thoughts on that. One is, I hope we get over our self-esteem issue. I hope that we begin to really feel and understand and believe that, yeah, we have a seat at the table, and yeah, we deserve a seat at the table, and our function and our profession is critical to the success of any organization, any group of people. I mean, what we do is make connections. What we do is inspire, motivate, change behavior, generate collaboration. And a lot of times in the corporate world, we're also tend to be the keeper of the values of an organization, and the people at the table who have an eye on all those things that all the business people, the really hardcore left brain, financial analyst type business people tend to either take for granted or don't necessarily see. So there is tremendous value in what you do. You have chosen a wonderful profession, and don't ever doubt that what you do isn't extremely valuable, because it is. So that's one. And then my second one is neuroscience, behavioral science. I just think, I think we just lack science a lot of times, and part of it is because we don't drive ourselves to be scientific enough, but also the other part of it is there's such a world of burgeoning science around behavioral aspects of what makes us decide and what makes us change, motivate, or be motivated or change our behaviors. And I think that's a very rich area for us to explore and to leverage in the work that we do.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could add one point to Wendy's excellent answers there. That first part about the place at the table, which she's right, a lot of us in PR talk about a lot. It's not just to be at the table, it's also what happens when you get there. The biggest, having worked with a lot of chief communications officers, and I actually did a project for the Arthur Page Society a few years ago, where I interviewed quite a few of the legendary CCOs for a project they were doing called the Authentic Enterprise, that was about the role of the CCO. And to a person, every single one of them came back to what Wendi was talking about and made that point that not just learning their business, but knowing business. In other words, being seen by the others in the C-suite as somebody who's not just there to give the answer of what we should talk about with the media. You're there because you understand the business, you understand the competitive set of your company and your industry, and you've got some ideas about how the company can position itself overall and advance those business results. That's an extremely important part. So in addition to behavioral science classes and seminars, I would also encourage some business classes and understanding the fundamentals of business and management.
So I think that's great, Pat. You know, I haven't given up my dream yet of going to an executive MBA.
Let's go together. Maybe in DePaul.
So I do think that's really important. And in my role at USAA, I'm very blessed because as an executive vice president, I do have responsibility for management of the organization and not just management of my functions. So that's a really important point that you made, and it does legitimize, you know, the ability to really practice our craft and our profession at the highest levels of business. So that's great.
Thank you. And now I'll pass it off to the students.
Hello everyone, I'm Nami Devaney. I'm a senior and I serve as the president for Polansky PRSSA Chapter. My questions will be directed towards Mr. Polansky. And so my first question to you is that you've already been CEO for about 2 years. What keeps you going in this position? What keeps you motivated in this progressing in this career path?
Well, first of all, let me just clarify that I did interview a person, Morris Dollar, in 1987. And I wasn't hired. So that's pretty strong motivation. I'll tell you, just building off of some of what the discussion has been already, I have such a passion for this business, and just the whole notion that Pat was touching on in terms of continuous learning. We always talk about how we look for intellectually curious people, because this is such a rich business. There's so many different opportunities that exist, and I come to work. I love it. Every day I come, it's always something different. Right? We represent clients in so many different industries. As a diversified firm, we're handling very substantive marketing-oriented issues, reputation-oriented issues. So it's just I find in an agency environment, very vibrant, a lot of interesting people who have completely different points of view at times, which makes for quite an interesting environment. So it's just that passion, and in my role, I'm fortunate enough to work with so many people around our global network and have the opportunity to travel and just the whole, just having that ability to spend time in other markets and other cultures is quite motivating.
Other than what keeps you motivated in your career paths?
Building on what Andy said, and I think whether you're in an agency or a corporate environment, we deal with some of the most fundamental issues facing companies and nonprofit organizations or whatever. And there's a palpable rush that comes when you really nail that problem or that opportunity, because it's not just problems, it could be opportunities. But you know, whether it's in crisis communications or you're launching a new product or whatever, that you have to work in a team. You've got to be able to collaborate effectively, and it's results oriented. And as Andy said, you've got that passion, and when you get together, you and that team almost feel like it's a drug. you know, and you want to feel it over and over and over again. It's the World Series, right? And yeah, in fact, yes, when we were welcoming new employees, in New York, I like to tell them that they're coming to the Yankee Stadium of public relations, which in New York is a good thing. And the difference is that in our Yankee Stadium, Babe Ruth still suits up every day and comes to the office, meeting Harold Burson. And so some of that thrill that Andy was alluding to of also working with these extraordinary clients that we're blessed to work with, and the colleagues that come from all different backgrounds. And now in the past couple of years, so at the ripe young age of 61, after being in the business all my whole career in North America, then suddenly I'm running Asia Pacific. And what a time to be in Asia. And what a time to just really be digging into some of the opportunities in China and India and Indonesia and so many other countries. And it's just a constant, wonderful, absorbing thing. And I haven't had a boring day in my professional life. I've not had one boring day. And that's, to me, more important than money.
There's good boring and not so good.
Wonderful. Well, my next question to Mr. Polansky is that, what are some most important decisions you make as a leader in your position?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think you can answer it a couple of different ways. I think the spirit, again, of a lot of what we're talking about. At the core, we're in an intellectual capital business, so the most important decision is always going to be about talent and making sure you're building an extraordinary team, depth of expertise in all around the world. And so, without a doubt, that is at the top of the list. I think in running a business, a public relations business in today's environment, naturally, is quite exciting and also very challenging. And I think one of the most important things is to look around corners for the firm and for our clients, because it is a fast-changing environment. And being able to understand the context of what's happening and be able to really understand what the market transitions are, and not react to them. Try to invest in people and develop expertise and help clients in our case navigate through what is an extraordinary complex changing world.
Thank you. Well, the next question is directed towards Lynne. You are very different from the panel of judges we have here. They're all professionals in the working industry. You come from an academic profile. Can you give us some suggestions for graduating seniors such as myself? How can we prepare ourselves for the future in the public relations?
Okay, and I should add that when I was asked to submit my biography, that I did emphasize that I was in the agency business for 15 years, including my own at the last 5 years. And before that, I was a working journalist in the print area. So I did go into academics with quite a bit of professional background.
You didn't hire me either.
You didn't hire me. I had to go teach. I think that it's really important for all of you to have internships. We have a great relationship at the University of Georgia. We have a great relationship with the Georgia chapter of PRSA, which is the second largest chapter in the nation. So our students have a lot of opportunities to do internships. And I stayed very close to the Georgia chapter because it's my professional development. It helps me network for my students. And the professionals tell me they want you guys to have 2 or 3 internships on your resumes when you come out. So obviously at our institution, and I'm sure at several of your others, you're going to be able to do 1 internship for credit. So you're going to need to plan to do some other informal internships. And I always encourage my students to look into working for our public affairs office or the Performing Arts Center. There are all kinds of informal internship opportunities on campus that do count on your resume. The other part of the equation here is I would really encourage you strongly to get involved with your local professional association, wherever you are, whatever is the biggest association, the most powerful. For our students, it's the Georgia chapter of PRSA or PRSA. I lived and worked in Florida before I got into academics, or as I got into academics, in the Florida Public Relations Association, which has been folded into our universal accreditation. It was in some areas bigger than PRSA. So the essential part here is to get involved with one of the professional societies and be active, be there. You need to go to meetings. You need to not be shy. You need to introduce yourself to people. You need to volunteer for committees. That's the way you're going to network and find your next job. I got my 2 most important jobs in public relations practice and in education from going to PRSA meetings. So I can't emphasize that enough. So internships, and don't worry about the GPAs too much. You know, when I was hiring, I would look to see what the students had done. You know, I wasn't so interested in a perfect 4.0 grade point average, and maybe some of my colleagues on the panel will address that.
I have one thing to add, just with respect to how one thinks about internships and approaching the process of looking for career opportunities. I would say 2 things. One, if an email finds its way to me, and I'm happy for people to contact me directly, or it comes through our HR function, or whatever the process may be, I can always tell if I have a strong interest in hiring someone based on that email. So everything you do matters, and you should be really thoughtful about how you craft outreach to a company, whether it's on the corporate side or an agency side. And alongside that, I think the internships are critical, but you're in a very competitive environment. A lot of students are certainly lining up lots of internships through their college career. So when you think about approaching a corporation for an opportunity, a particular job, you have to be distinctive. You have to come up with a creative way of distinguishing yourself from all the other candidates, because it is very competitive, and you have to be realistic about that and creative, and break through we get thousands of resumes every year, and we're very thoughtful and careful about going through those. We take the process very seriously, but you have to stand out.
Thank you so much. Now I'll direct questions to the next.
My name is Kostin Petrulski. I'm with the chapter of Indiana University Northwest. I'm the president of the chapter, we're the chapter. And my questions are directed to Jose Rivera. As a mentor, which details do you emphasize to mentees in order for them to become successful?
Many of the folks here today have mentioned many of the things that are extremely important, right? Internships is very valuable. One of the things that I will definitely encourage you to do is to not wait. For some reason there's this message that you need to wait until your junior and senior years to do internships, right? I would encourage you to start right away, right? To start thinking about how you're gonna, where you want to start to internship, who you want to start to internship with. And like Andy was saying, crafting those emails for perhaps doing an informational request where you're going to send an email to a CEO just to seek some information. So I would, encourage you to start thinking about very different and strategical ways in which you can reach out to the folks that you're aspiring to be, right? So those are some of the things that I would definitely encourage students to do. Other things is, in terms of from an academic perspective, I encourage students to make themselves memorable to their professors. And that means obviously participating, thinking about what you're going to be discussing in class, and be able to provide good input that's going to make yourself memorable. And that's in the classroom and outside the classroom as well, right? So sometimes, for example, anytime I'm in my office, my door is open. And my door is open for a reason. My door is open for students to come in, right, and discuss and further that discussion that was hopefully fruitful in the classroom. So they'll take those opportunities to make yourself memorable.
And my second question is, the majority here are students, and some of us are graduating pretty soon. As a student about to enter the real world as a young professional, what words of wisdom will you share with us to keep in mind as we go on?
I would say stay current. Once again, many of the things that the folks here have mentioned. Stay current with what's going on. You want to have a working knowledge of everything that's current events, of what's going on in the world, so that when something does come up, you're not starting from scratch. You have a working knowledge of whatever is being brought to you, right? Or at least have some sort of knowledge of what's being discussed in your new job, right? Once again, you're trying to make yourself memorable. Now you're trying to make yourself memorable in your entry-level position, right? Which is going to lead to hopefully something else. Once again, PRSA, all the different areas that my colleagues here have discussed, I think are extremely important to always keep in mind. And you know, I would also encourage you to, we all have cell phones, it's part of who we are, it's part of our culture. You know, use that little notebook, right? You know, write some of the things down that you want to encourage yourself to always do, whether it's to ask questions, to stay current, things you want to write notes to yourself to keep you, to remember what some strategical things that you were thinking about, you know, the night before, or in the classroom, or things like that.
I want to add on to that, along the same lines, the two words I would say are pay attention. Opportunities are going to come your way that you are going to need to be paying attention to recognize them and to capitalize on them. So, and obviously you need to be prepared to follow up when you do recognize an opportunity. So I think that's really important as well.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Malia Peterson and I serve as the VP of Special Events for DePaul's PRSSA. So I'm just going to start the question and answer. So if you just want to raise your hand and then introduce yourself before you ask your question, that would be great. So does anyone have any questions? Okay.
I have a question to kind of build off of what Wendi and Pat were talking about, but the other panelists feel free to chime in. You were discussing how we, all as PR students, really need to embrace business sense and taking business classes. I just read a really great book that talked about business essentials for strategic communicators. But I was just wondering, in terms of taking that to the classroom, what classes would you really suggest? Sometimes I think PR students were a little intimidated by the business school, or we think it's a little out of our reach, but I mean, I've taken some of them, they're not horrible. So I guess I'm just wondering, which ones you really would suggest to young people to take during their college career?
Finance. Yeah, I think, and I think you know, some of the management programs, you know, I remember when I was getting ready to take over as CEO of our North American business, a book had just come out called You're in Charge, Now What? And it had a lot of very good case studies on different situations, whether you were coming from inside the organization or from outside, about things to be thinking about and how to plan out not only your first few months where you're setting the agenda, but also how you build teams, how you deal with colleagues that you used to be peers with and now you're leading them. And then the other one that was a very important book was by, in fact, I would say any book you found by this particular professor, Rosabeth Moss Cantor from Harvard. But it was a book about, I'm going to say, 7 years ago, called Confidence. And essentially she uses a lot of cases from business, sports, and other parts of life to essentially make the case that winning begets winning and losing begets losing. If you think like a winner, if you plan like a winner, if you take the approach that Andy was talking about earlier with that picture, where you focus in on fundamentals, you perfect that very well, you focus, and you don't get discouraged by failures. Never, never, never lose the willingness and courage to take chances. It's okay to fail. I mean, the greatest successes of all time have come from people who first failed. That goes for presidents who first ran and lost, or business leaders. And it's okay, you just learn from that failure and you move on and you become stronger. And I think that's thinking like a winner. I think she uses the example that, you know, everybody in the world who knows baseball expected that fan to reach in there and grab that baseball when the Cubs were going to go to the World Series. Because the Cubs lose. And if you think you're going to lose, you lose. And I think that's really important. Be bold and be confident and take chances.
That's probably not the most popular example.
I'd just like to add, I love that, because I believe that wholeheartedly. And, but coming back to the question of classes to take in business school, marketing. I mean, our two professions, the businesses of each of these things are coming together, and I mean, you guys know it better than I do. I think in the future that there's going to be less of a bright line between, there's not a bright line today between marketing and communications or public relations. And I think there's a lot for us to learn from marketing principles and theories and work and people that sometimes we hold ourselves a little bit apart from. And I think that's a huge mistake. So take marketing classes.
I'd like to ask the students 2 questions, if I may. How many of you have already taken a marketing course or will be taking a marketing course? Yay. Okay. Second question, how many of you have or know that you will be, perhaps in your management or administration courses or some other class, be doing a financial statements analysis of a Fortune 500 corporation? Good, okay. That's something that we've recently added to our management courses because we know that they need to know this, so.
It's interesting how much, Lynn, to make that point, how often we're talking about somebody to be good for a project or whatever, and this should be fundamental, but it's often how often we say, and this person really knows how to read a balance sheet.
Right, right, exactly.
We all should know that. You all should know that, but not everybody does.
So if that's not in your program, talk to your professors about it or have them email me. I'll be glad to give them some sources.
Okay, do we have any other questions? And if you want to stand up to and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Brian Hodes. I'm a member of the PRSSA at Columbia College here in Chicago. And on the subject of beneficial literature to further one's career, I wanted to ask a related question that what hobbies do you feel are the most useful in making successful connections in one's professional life and, you know, bettering oneself as far as having more outlets to, more things to discuss with various types of people?
I've got a very good answer, but it's controversial, so I'm going to do it.
I'll jump in. So personally, I'm a kayaker, right? And so what I like about kayaking, I like a lot of things about kayaking. One is, in this always-on world we live in, and I have struggled with work-life balance because I feel that that's another thing that converges all the time. It's hard to get a hold of me on the water, and sometimes it's good to float out there and think a bit and be on your own. And it's also interesting that where I kayak, the currents are very different, and this kind of reminds me of my business life, because sometimes it can be somewhat smooth, the water, and sometimes it can be, the currents can be pretty strong, and depending on which direction you're going, that could be a good thing or a tough thing. So, thank you.
I started a hobby about a dozen years ago, which is an interesting one for me. I'll tell you about in a second. But it was about learning about wine. And the funny thing about it is I hardly drink any wine, but I probably have about 500 or 600 bottles in my house. Because I started learning about it, and I just keep getting this stuff and don't drink it. So if you come to Washington, come to my house.
Your fellow honorees.
My wife and our friends love this hobby. But the reason I bring it up in this setting is that there's, you know, there are so many different situations in which people love talking about wine. And a lot of our clients, even if they don't drink that much of it themselves, it's an age-old thing that goes back to the earliest days of history, and it's infinitely complex. And I actually took up the hobby consciously because I needed to divert my attention from working too much, and I wanted to try and find some more interests outside the normal day-to-day business. And you know, baseball wasn't cutting it enough, golf wasn't cutting it enough, so I started learning about this, and it's just fascinating. And so whether it's kayaking or wine, I think that's something that gives you some ability in a business setting to have interesting conversations, to share information. I feel like not only do I give interesting gifts of wine itself, but what I do, in fact, I've done about 15 wine tasting classes in our offices around the world, because what I do is I share what I've learned, which I've spent a lot of time learning about this, and a lot of people, even if they're not that interested, they like to know what to take to somebody's house, what to have when someone's coming over, how to navigate a wine list in a restaurant. So, and then once in a while I come across clients that we end up spending 3 hours over dinner talking about wine, and we have a great time.
I would also encourage you guys to travel as much as you can, and if you have opportunities to study abroad, you know, really give serious consideration to that. We just started a study abroad in China program, and Pat was just over the moon about that.
Oh, absolutely.
We want to just comment on that, how important Asia is.
Extremely important, and frankly, I don't, especially with what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years of the global economy, anybody who has a chance either in school or when you're working to have an opportunity to spend time in or around Greater China, I think it's extremely important, because that understanding that part of the world is interesting, but also both the complexity of their problems and the opportunities there are amazing. And one of my former colleagues wrote a book called "Getting Ahead by Going Abroad," and she's written a second one called a similar theme about studying abroad, and a lot of interesting cases of very successful people whose careers really took off after they spent some time outside their native country.
Any other questions? You right there.
Good evening, I'm Sarah Lavner. I'm representing the University of Alabama, and I'm actually in the master's program there. First off, congratulations. This is a huge honor for each of you. I guess my question is directed towards Mr. Polansky and I guess Dr. Salllot. It's related to agency work. And I really want to know, for those of us who are interested in agency PR, what do you believe is the most important quality that we should possess going in?
After you go.
Well, the first thing I would say, in a very fundamental sense, is and I would always counsel my boys who were lacrosse players to do this when they were thinking about where to play in college. It's very much true also, if you're looking at an agency, recruit the agency, don't wait until the agency recruits you. So you really want to understand what it's all about, what the different firms are all about, what their specialties are, what's their client portfolio look like. And then I think most importantly, from your perspective, it's going to be all about the people. So firms, there's lots and lots of great firms, thankfully in our world, and I'm sure you all could thrive at many of them. But you really have to feel a great connection to the people that you meet right from the beginning. And so I would just emphasize that, because I just think it's so important. Beyond that, with respect to if you're looking at a larger firm, like Burson Marsteller or Weber Shandling, or Fleischmann. You got me there. There's just so many different possibilities because the diversified nature of the companies. There's different practice areas. You can develop expertise in a particular industry sector. You can develop different types of functional expertise, such as crisis management we were talking about earlier, or issues, or more of the marketing, or in today's environment, naturally digital marketing and social media ability is key. So a lot of it's about what interests you, and because there's vast opportunities within the agency environment. So you have to learn a little bit about the firms, get to know the people, and see what feels right and what is intriguing to you as you're starting out in terms of a particular specialty area.
I would say, first of all, be prepared to work hard, and that means long hours.
Especially inflation.
The idea of being the first in the morning and the last out at night probably is a good mantra to go into with agency work. Second piece of advice was advice that was given me at the second agency I was with, and that was figure out what is keeping your boss up at night and what can you do to support that or address that. And on the agency side, it's really interesting because you're concerned about your clients, but you're also concerned about your boss, so inside the agency. So, you're gonna have to get the big picture there. Third thing is get a mentor. And I would really encourage if you're a woman, have a male and a female mentor, and if you're a man, have a female and a male mentor. You're gonna get different things from the different genders, and they're really important.
Great, any other questions?
Hi, I'm Lily Kim. I'm a grad student here at DePaul, and I actually interviewed with Weber Shenwood too, and I didn't get it, but that's okay.
We'll talk.
I'm underneath. I'm above you guys right now. One floor above. Maybe I'll see you in the elevator, but.
This isn't going well.
So those of us that start off at the associate position or junior, what's the best way, or what advice can you give us so we can climb that ladder and reach a senior position, be at the CC level?
Well, it's just initiative. I think people are looking for initiative, and again, there's so many different opportunities. I think it's easy to get in a situation. I tell people this, even with respect to the agency-client dynamic, where you have so much in terms of what's the ask. You have to think beyond the ask, whether you're serving in a client service context or in your agency role. What more can you do? Because that's how, again, you're going to stand out from everybody else. And I think working hard and having a strong work ethic is important, candidly, because it's just another way to stand out in the crowd. And so those are the types of things I think that are important. Just make yourself known. And I would also say, sorry, Wendy, I would also say, I'm always surprised that, maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm surprised that more people don't seek me out, who are just joining the, maybe they're thinking the same thing about me, I don't know. But I just think you should be bold and consider your outreach in a very broad context and try to get to know as many people as you can at all levels of the company, across all the different areas of the company.
I think, I say the same with you, I don't ever turn down somebody who wants to come and talk about an idea.
It's true.
I like what you said about make yourself known. I was going to jump in and say, and make yourself indispensable. So make yourself the person that everybody wants to have on their team, and everybody, and you can be counted on.
What about moving around agencies, like changing jobs? Like how long should you stay around agency?
I would say, unless there's some reason you need to, keep in mind that in the first few years you're in the business, I certainly wouldn't chase a little bit of money to move around. When I'm looking at somebody in their formative years, which is to say the first 3 to 6 years in the business, for every move they make, and I don't know that any HR person would confirm this, by the way, but in my mind, every move they make, I'm deducting about 6 months from the quality of their experience. Because they probably took some time looking for that job, and they wound down at that place. Very often, especially these days, they take off a bunch of time in between, and then they get ramping up at the new place. Whereas somebody else might have been really tackling a problem at that job they had. This is a learning period. It's a learning period all through your career, we talked about, but now especially, you're preparing yourself for those leadership roles. Somebody asked the other day, how did you prepare for the role you're in? The way you prepare, you should be starting right now to be preparing to be in Andy's job, and be thinking about what am I going to need to know, and what parts of business am I going to know, but also who's doing it, who's climbing that ladder, and then go and talk to them, and they almost always will be very happy to talk. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the big, poobah Andy Polansky. One of my best mentors when I got to Burson, maybe the best, maybe the most valuable, my first 2 years at Burson, was somebody about 3 levels below me, but he knew everything about that place. And he knew everything about how to get stuff done there. And I glommed on to him, and he's still a great friend. Now he runs his own agency, but he was not somebody somebody would have in a textbook said, oh, there's your mentor. He was unbelievably valuable.
Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Jacob Voss, and I'm Vice President of Loyal PRSSA. And Mr. Polansky touched a little bit on this before, but we live in such an action-packed society where we're always going, we're always doing something. How have you all maintained your work-life balance, and kind of what's the mindset that you carry on a daily basis? I'm interested to hear.
This is the question where we all look at each other. This must be Wendy's.
No, we're all looking at each other like, has anybody got that figured out? It's very challenging. I mean, it is. It's just,
Especially these days with the 24/7
yeah.
instant communications.
I get asked this a lot. I'm sure you guys do too, and you all probably get asked a lot as well. It's you just have to do whatever makes sense for you. And I do think, I hear all this. For me, everybody's different, right? So for some people, they like the flex. They sort of work and live. In fact, my HR peer at USAA says, it's not a balance. It's a combination. The work and life those are one and the same. Work is life, and so having those two things kind of combined works for some people, and for other people, like me, I have to just wall off time and turn off the phone.
You should go kayaking.
I'm gonna go kayaking. Actually, I go hiking, which is how I did this, right? It's also hard to get me on the phone in the middle of the wilderness. So, you just kind of have to do what makes sense. I don't. Do you have a better answer?
One of the things about it is I think you can tell from all of us that we really like what we do. And when you like what you do, when you're passionate about what you're doing, it doesn't seem so much like work. I do want to encourage you all to take care of exercise. I just heard some young professionals talking about a CrossFit program. They work 20 minutes. We work out 20 minutes on a Saturday, and they got it down. And I'm like, wow, I should look into that. So you do need to pay attention to your health. But aside from that, just love what you do, and you won't have to worry about it.
I would definitely take care of yourself, listen to your body, in terms of, there's going to be points where you're going to feel very stressed and overwhelmed, and that is actually your body talking to you. Now it's going to be your own personal decision. There are some instances where some folks just will push through that, right? And it's an individual answer, and I think it's the reason why it's such a difficult question to answer for the folks up here, because it's individual. Do you want to push through that really stressful moment? Many of you are already doing that in terms of your classes, so there is some preparation for that, and you're already, I think, it's similar situations, right? That last minute paper or that big project that you're doing, and you think about what you feel like, what does your body feel like, and how do you manage that? You're going to be taking those same things onto the professional world, right? So to think about it from that perspective, and I think you will get your answer there.
We're going to keep the conversation going on live, so be sure to do a #PlankMentor. I want to conclude, though, with, first of all, thanking the students. Malia, thank you for they studied these individuals so well that we had a lot of questions, and the students from the University of Alabama submitted probably 150 questions. We can't get to all of them, but I'm going to share it with them, and then over time, we hope that they will either tweet or send us answers, and then we'll do that so that you get a full appreciation for the answers that you submitted. I'd also like to hear words of advice, and they were anticipating this, from John and Ann. That last question, and anything that you would like to share after Ann, your amazing career, and the fact that John is runs a terrific agency. Thoughts from what you've heard. React to what you heard today.
Okay, well, I don't want to sit in a hole. I would only say I spent 15 years in public sector public relations, 16 years in corporate public relations with a big company, and then another 10 years in an agency. And so I would, when you say what you're looking for in a job, when you get out of college or finish your program, I would tell you, don't just look at companies and at agencies. There's a whole world out there in public sector public relations and in nonprofit public relations that is incredible. And there are some of the great people in the country today in our profession are practicing in those arenas. It's also a great way to get to meet people. When I ran Flushman Hillard in Minnesota, I really wanted to hire people that came with some experience. And by that I mean, maybe you were a volunteer on a PR committee for theater, or you helped with a school district advisory committee. There are just so many ways for you to get that kind of experience so that when you come in, you're bringing something. You're not just coming in with a lot of stars in your eyes. And I think being in PRSSA, I used to advertise jobs and say PRSSA student preferred, because I always felt like the rough edges were off. So it's just, I could only second everything that's been said up here today. It is the most wonderful profession in the world. I wouldn't trade a minute of my 40-year career in public relations for any other job. It's just been wonderful, and you are about to embark on the greatest adventure of your life.
I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that Ann took me under her wing when I went into retailing, and there was no jealousy. She said, "Hey, kid, this is what you need to know," and she is one of my great mentors. So thank you. And John,
what outstanding advice and guidance and insights we've gotten tonight from this amazing panel. I think one thing I would add is part of the journey that you're on and the journey that you're going to have for your entire career, but more importantly your lifetime, is also getting to know yourself. So all of these questions, whether it's should you go into agency and which agency or corporate, nonprofit, you can get great advice from mentors and leaders in the industry, but also you need to listen to who you are and get to know and explore who you are. With a work-life balance, what's the right balance for one person wouldn't be a fit or wouldn't be pleasurable or filled with joy for another person. So with that work-life balance, you need to get to know yourself, but also think about the different aspects of who you are, and more importantly, who you want to be. You know, what role does family play in your life? And think about that and make sure that you are investing in family and spending time and giving emotional investment into that. We, of course, given this and given why we're together, we're concentrated on career. But to be the leader you want to be, you also have to be the person that you're going to be proud of. So choosing a mentor, what books to read, what courses to take, what's the right career fit. A lot of that is, it has to be, for it to be right, it has to be personal and unique to you. So the career journey is going to be successful for all of you. It's going to be fulfilling and rewarding. But make sure that your life is also fulfilling and rewarding.
He missed it earlier. your Cubs reference. But Kevin Sagi, Manager of Communications for the Cubs, who was one of our previous honorees, just arrived, so I want to recognize Kevin. And to show you how good he is, he doesn't even know what we've been talking about. So what have you been up to today, Kevin?
I was trying to manage a news cycle. Don't really have a whole lot we can say right now.
Darn, I thought we were getting breaking news from you.
Sorry.
Well, share with this group, we're just concluding, so share with this group what's happened with your career, short story, we still have a little bit to go, and what you would recommend them starting out.
Well, I really have a spot here, so I came in late. I started at Catcher as an intern through networking, where I met Ron and a lot of the other board members and considered a few firms. Started as an intern, signed a 1 year lease on a 3-month internship to catch up. Got hired on and worked out partly because I trusted Ron as my mentor, to know that he could help guide my career with catch up somewhere else. Was there for about 3 years, loved it. The Cubs opportunity came up, didn't know what to do because I loved Ketchum. Approached him about it. We had a very honest dialogue about if the job was right for me or not. And it turned out it was. Made that jump and keep in touch ever since. And then good things keep happening between folks like Keith and Ron and Gary and others who are in this room. Just managed to stay involved and keep working on projects together and find excuses to stay in touch.
And Kevin is also the person to blame for me writing a blog, since he came up with the idea 9 years ago and talked me into it and came up with the name. So thanks, Kevin. Let's just get wrap-up comments from each of you, and we'll start down at the end rather than at this end.
Last comments for me is just to be passionate, like you've heard, in terms of mentoring. That's one of my passions. That's one of the things that I'm always thinking about. How am I going to help students? How am I going to prepare students so that the folks here are happy with what we're producing for them, right? That you're prepared. But what I will add to that is you're going to be in a position to mentor at some point, right? And that onus is set squarely on your shoulders if someone is doing that for you. And that's why some of the folks that are here for you today. And when you're in that position, like I said, remember that, right? And you have to mentor those that are coming from behind you, because you want our field to be the known for having that strong network. That's what we do. That's what we do. So think about always mentoring, how you're going to help those that are coming behind you, and be passionate.
It's such a great honor for me to be on this panel to receive this recognition. And I want to tell you guys, you're all really impressive, so keep up the good work. Again, I want to reiterate what I said before. Pay attention. If you had told me when I was your age, sitting in a setting like this, that I was going to go into PR, because I was a journalism major and worked in journalism for several years, and then become a professor at the University of Georgia, I would have said, have you been traveling to Colorado lately? So, you just don't know where your life's path is going to take you. Just be prepared to take advantage of it, seize the day, and I wish you every success.
I would just say, I hope it came across, certainly. I absolutely love this profession. And I think you get that sense that the more people you meet in this business, I think you'll get that type of feeling. So I think for what it's worth, as you contemplate a career in this industry, know that it's something that is extraordinarily rewarding. And I think that, thankfully, perhaps, I think the field has never been more respected in boardrooms, by marketers. So it is a very, very exciting time to be launching a career in this business, without question. So, as I said before, be distinctive, stand out, take initiative, and I'm sure you'll all do really well. And feel free to consider Weber Shamwood as career options.
I would just say you all have a unique information. You're all students right now. You won't be students forever. And you have something that a friend of mine likes to call student privilege. So as students, you can ask questions. You can go and find people who do what you want to do. And you can knock on their doors, and you can call them, and you can ask for advice, and you can find a mentor. And so I would just encourage you to be bold, to make your own path for yourself. And I know that you'll all be tremendously successful. Good luck.
We've touched on several points here, particularly to reinforce the be bold, take chances, and be inquisitive. But I want to, there's one other point that underlies a lot of the points we've made, and it really is the foundation of why we're all here today. And that is it's two parallel points. One is to be a leader, and leaders lead. They make other people look good. The most successful leaders and the people that others really want to work with are not the ones that rush out in front and try and get in front of the picture or try and take all the credit for something. They're the ones that really stand out to us are the ones that quietly lead or lead by example, and that are constantly trying to make their teams look good. When I first joined Burson, our CEO at the time had a saying which was, prize the individual, but celebrate the team. And whether you're in a public sector setting, a corporate setting, or an agency setting, there's nobody, if Harold Burson were sitting here now, I'd say it with all due respect to Harold, nobody is hiring Weber Shanwick because of Andy Polansky or Burson Marcella because of Harold Burson. They're hiring us, or they're working with the corporate communications team within that C-suite because they see the magic that happens when that team works together and when they make each other look good. So as we're telling you to stand out, differentiate, be bold, I also want to just close with that point. Be thinking about how you make other people better, because every step you do in that, I can tell you, every minute I've spent mentoring in my life, I gain more than I gave. No question about it.
Wow, what a great close. Thank you.